Welcome to another burst session. This is a session that is part of our math materials series. And for this particular session, we're going to be looking at Rekenreks and how they can be used across the grades from kindergarten through grade 5. My name is Janice Novakowski, and I'm one of the district teacher consultants for mathematics and numeracy in the Richmond School District. So when we think about math materials in general, there's a connection in our curriculum specifically around one of the communication competencies. And from kindergarten to grade 12, it asks that students are able to represent mathematical ideas in concrete, pictorial, and symbolic forms. And so whenever we're learning a new idea or we're learning a new process or strategy, learning through concrete forms and then moving to pictorial and symbolic, and that sort of that relationship between all three of those is really important for developing conceptual understanding as well as skills and processes. Some current research around those things, and in our curriculum, we call it concrete, pictorial, symbolic. In much of the math education literature, they refer to concrete, representational, abstract, or CRA. And the current research, some of it coming out of OISE in Ontario with Dr. Kathy Marks-Kirpan, suggests that that isn't necessarily a linear progression, that you move from one stage to the next, that actually students who have a deeper understanding of mathematics and those concepts are able to move fluently and flexibly between all three representations. And so going back and forth between those representations, and that concrete modeling is really a critical part of all of that mathematical thinking and understanding. In our district on RichNet, we have a series and a collection of math materials that we hope that teachers have access to either in their classrooms or within their school. And Rekenreks are one of those ones that are listed for K-2. Those are all on Learn 38. There's some videos that go with those. So what are Rekenreks? They look a little bit like an abacus. They are a 20 bead frame that were developed in the Netherlands at the Freudenthal Institute. So they are research-based mathematics material. And the colors were specifically chosen during their research studies with children in terms of differentiating colors, and really to build that understanding of 5-ness and 10-ness. And that idea of benchmark numbers. So the idea that a 7 is made up of a 5 and a 2. And we know in our kindergarten curriculum, we work with numbers up to 10, and then in grade 1 up to 20. But students continue to think about addition and subtraction to 20 all the way through kindergarten through grade 5. So this provides an access point. The Rekenrek provides an access point for many of our students to understand those addition and subtraction processes, along with counting and subitizing and equal grouping. So I'm going to play along here. I'm going to just see if this works. We're going to stop sharing my slides, and I'm going to change my video, and I'm going to show a little Rekenrek here. There we go. And I'm going to just change the mirroring on this so that you can see it in the way that it's meant to be seen. There we go. So hopefully you're seeing it so that all the beads are moved to the right of the Rekenrek. That's the starting position. The first 5 beads in each row are red, followed by 5 white beads. And then the bottom row is the same. And when you're using a Rekenrek, part of the research behind it is the students aren't counting 1 to 1. They're moving the beads in groups. So if you ask them to represent 5, you want them to be able to subitize or see that that's 5 and just move 5. And then if you want them to make 7, they could either add 2 more. Again, I'm sliding those 2 over together. So that's one way of making 7, or they could add 2 more to the bottom. So that might be one question that you do with students. They could have their Rekenreks either all together in a circle on the carpet, or if you're working with small groups, and you could say, okay, make 3. And then how could you change that to 6? And have students think about different ways that they could do that. So again, they could add 3 more there, or they could do 3 more here and say 3 and 3 is 6. If they move these 3 over, and they know 3 and 3 is 6, they're seeing that 6 is made up of 5 and 1 more. So 5 and 1 makes 6, and that's using that benchmark number of 5. If I was using this for adding and subtracting, so for example, if I made 8, and then I was going to add 6 to 8. So I'm going to slide over my 6. I can now see 8 and 6 8 on the top, 6 on the bottom, but I can see my 2 5s here, my 2 rows of red beads, 5 and 5 makes 10, and then I can see that that's 4 more. So 8 and 6 makes 14. I could also add, if I was going to do 8 and 6, I would have to decompose that 6 into 2 and 4, because I've got 2 beads here, so 2 here, and then 4 more. So again, different ways that we can use the Rekenreks and represent our thinking in different ways. We can also use the Rekenreks for counting by multiples. So again, sliding those groups over 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And this is where you could pause and say how many more until we have 20. They can see that visual clue here, but they can also see the missing part here. So how many more groups of 2? 2 more groups of 2, 18, 20. So this is how we can also connect to multiplication. So if we were doing groups of 4, for example, how many groups of 4 make up 20? Well, here's 4, and here's another 4, and then here's 4 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of 4 make up 20. So different ways that we can introduce different concepts. We can also use this for introducing fractions. So how many tenths or how many 20ths are red? If I was only looking at one row, half are red, half are white. 5/10 are red, 5/10 are white. In this representation here, 7 beads, 5/10 are red, 3/10 are white to make up 8/10 of the total there. Okay, so again, different ways we can play with the Rekenreks and use it to deepen students' understanding of mathematics. All right, I'm going to go back to my slides here. Sorry, this is a little clunky. All right. So just some, just to sort of review some of those things I shared, some different mathematics that we can investigate with Rekenreks, counting, subitizing, building that understanding of 5ness and 10ness, which is so important in the kindergarten and grade 1 mathematics curriculum, using 5 and 10 as benchmark numbers. Teen numbers, really important in grade 1. Teen numbers are very difficult for students. And the Rekenreks with the 10 on the front row, and then how many more? 11, 2 more makes 12, 3 more makes 13, 4 more makes 14. They can visually see that 10 and some more. You can connect the Rekenreks to a 10-frame representation. So again, we've got 10 across, but it's made up of 5 and 5. So it's just a stretched out version of a 10 frame. Each row, composing and decomposing quantities, skip counting and counting by multiples, fractions and decimals, addition and subtraction processes, and then thinking of equal groups with multiplication and division, introducing those. So this is an example from my kindergarten and grade 1 class just earlier this week. I used a virtual manipulative from the Math Learning Center, and this is their number rack. Rekenreks are sometimes called arithmetic racks or number racks or calculating racks or just math racks. And so this is, I think they call it the number rack. And so we thought about different ways to make 10. So this is showing 6 and 4 here. And then I was showing them how to record that. So I've got 6 beads here and then 4 beads here and then writing the symbols. So connecting the visual or pictorial representation with the symbols for those numbers. And that's a really important, learning for our K-2 students. This was one of the tasks that they could choose from during math workshop. So showing different ways to make 10, we had different Rekenreks out. You could also put different abacuses or abaci out. And then I just had a ways to make 10 recording form. Some of them drew the beads, some of them wrote the numbers like this student. And then there's also 100 bead Rekenreks, 50 at the top, and then it reverses the order of color just for visual discrimination. And so you can have ways to make 100 as well as ways to make 10 as students play with that. And then making your own Rekenreks. Some teachers do this, and just, using cardboard from your recycling bin and pipe cleaners, and then students can choose 5 beads and 5 white beads. So you may not have enough red beads, but as long as there's 5 of a dark enough color that can be distinguishable against the white, that's important. And then you just tape the pipe cleaners down on the back with some masking tape so they don't slip and slide. And then students can use the Rekenrek like that. When I taught kindergarten, I made them bracelets, just a single row of 10, 5 and 5. And they would make different numbers and move the beads around and compose and decompose quantities with that. Some resources to support your learning around Rekenreks. There's some text resources working with the Rekenrek and the 100-bead Rekenrek there on the left. The Number Talks book, which is at our DRC and is in many school libraries, has a whole front section on number talks using Rekenreks in early primary. So there's all sorts of ideas there. And then on the top right and in the middle there, you see some of those virtual manipulatives, the number rack from the Math Learning Center, and then Didax also has the 20-bead Rekenrek, as well as the 100-bead Rekenrek. And again, so it's great for demonstrating and putting it up on the screen so that everyone can see the movements. On buildmathminds.com, she has a book on using the math rack, and that's available for purchase at her store. And then there's also a free downloadable PDF that's available through the Math Learning Center. And again, it's just called the Rekenrek. It's all the research behind it and learning to think mathematically with the Rekenrek. So there's the link there that you're able to download that PDF. And it has lots of instructional ideas and approaches to sort of where children are, then where to take them next with the Rekenrek. So just as we've been doing this math materials series, we've been sharing some different tips for using math materials in your classroom. And the Rekenrek should really be seen as a thinking tool, you know, much like a 100 chart or a 10 frame or a number line. So making sure that you have those thinking tools out and visible for your students. And you may not have all of them out and visible. You might have one out on a counter. I think you can see behind me, I have my counter, like a little display of different abacuses and Rekenreks. And then maybe you have the rest of them in a bin or a basket or a container that when you want lots of children to use them, you can bring those out. But I think making it sure that it's visible for students, they're like, oh, I could use the Rekenrek for that, is an important thing when we're setting up our classroom environment to have those tools available to our students. So just as a provocation for you, think about how you might use the Rekenrek to support student learning. And thank you for joining me today for this burst session.